If we could just set the scene with a very simple timeline and talk a little bit about the early life and the early influences on Tesla.
Yeah, well, Tesla was born in 1856 in Lika, which is I've been there. It's about maybe 50 miles from the Adriatic Sea, or maybe 35 miles, but it's way up in the hills, and it's along a mountain, and then there's this giant field which goes for miles and miles, and way off in the distance are the Dinaric Alps. It's in the middle of nowhere. When I was there in 1986, there were actually I saw ox carts. And Tesla talks about when he was 5 years old, they moved to the bustling town of Gospic. So, you know, you're in this farm area and you're thinking, well, he's moving all the way to town. This town is 5 miles away. It's right there. And it's a small town. And so he grew up in a very small area. But his father was a priest and his mother was related to one of the highest priests of Serbia, living in Croatia. And so he's from an elite family. Educated elite. They were military people in the family. So he became highly educated. And of course, he was brilliant. And so he went to Graz University in Austria as an undergraduate degree. And I don't think he ever actually got his degree. And then he transferred to the University of Prague. And he studied languages, mathematics, and everything that you would study in, you know, physics, electrical engineering, anything that anybody would study in college. But he was also an advanced mathematician. And one of the teachers took a liking to him and would give him extra, difficult questions to answer mathematically. There was a recent book written by a guy, it's a Princeton University Press. And the guy actually says that Tesla wouldn't have understood Maxwell's equations. This is just crazy. If you look at Tesla's Colorado Springs notes, there were all these equations. I have no idea how to understand them. I mean, I studied math. I was even an honors math student, and I can't understand these mathematical equations. He was a mathematical genius. So he went to the University of Prague. He never really finished. I think he did enough for himself. You know, it's about 1880, 1881. But while he was in Prague, and while he was at Graz, he was introduced to the prevailing technology, which was called direct current. Now, in those days, in order to light light bulbs, you had to convert alternating current to direct current. The reason why you had to convert it was alternating current is exactly that. Alternating changes its direction of flow at thousands of miles a second. So if it's going back and forth like this, how do you make it go in one direction? So what they did was they added something called a commutator. What the commutator did was it removed the back and forth flow and just made it go in one direction, but it was highly inefficient. When Tesla got introduced to all this, you could only send electricity about a mile, and then only for lighting homes, and power dropping off it over distance. So if you were in a village and you were close to the power source, your lights were bright. If you were a mile away, you had dim lights. You couldn't run a refrigerator or an iron or vacuum cleaner, forget all that. You couldn't do any of that. All you could do was light your homes. That's the world Tesla was in. He intuitively felt there had to be a way, since alternating current was naturally flowing back and forth, there had to be a way to harness it that way without the commutator. And Professor Poschel said this was an impossible dream. This is a perpetual motion scheme. You'll never be able to do it, Tesla. Don't waste your time. And Tesla just felt intuitively he was right and spent the next 5 years figuring out how to do away with the commutator. And he started working for a cousin in Budapest in 1882. And at that time, he had a revelation. He figured out how to do away with the commutator. And basically, in my book, you can read it. It'd take you 3 or 4 minutes to understand. It took him 5 years. Nobody else on the planet could figure it out, but he figured it out.